Hello, Anna and Elisso. Thank you so much for your time and for meeting.
Hello, Nina.
Hello, Nina.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Sure. So let's start at the beginning of our conversation about distinguished Georgian artist Vera Pagava. So what is your and Elisso's precise connection to Vera Pagava to start with?
Well, Anna will answer.
Well, we are the estate of Pagava's legacy, and our main missions are to preserve and promote Pagava's work and archive through exhibition, also conservation and preservation of her painting, and through books. That's what we are aiming to and trying to organize since now 1990. And maybe you can tell about how the association was created.
The association was created in 1991, after the death of Vera Pagava, and
she passed away in 1988, right?
Yeah. And she was ill, and yes, she passed away. And the association, I used this association after created it to make some humanitarian help in Georgia during the 90s.
Yes, it was bad time, I remember.
The worst period of Georgia. So I started to work as I'm a medical doctor. That was and through the name of Vera Pagava. And after I started to work on the archive of Vera Pagava, to classify all this archive, because she has in her house, she kept everything. So we had to select things and keep them very clearly. That's the main thing. So, and slowly I became to promote, after the death of my mother, we started to promote the works of Vera through exhibition. One in the 2008 in the Musée du Montparnasse, and in Georgia too, in 12, and voila.
And we will talk about your mother and also the ongoing exhibitions, which are very exciting, but let's get there. So I would like to start with sharing the screen so I can have a presentation that has some visual information for our viewers to better understand what we're talking about. So let's start. You can see the screen, right? Great. Okay, so I would like to start also with the beginning here. So tell me a little bit about her parents and her family. So here we see a picture of Vera, a photograph of Vera with her father, who was a lawyer, as I understand, right?
That's in Georgia. And what can I say? That there was a family, very intellectual family, and the father was a lawyer, the mother was a teacher, as it's written.
Yes, and professor of literature, right?
Yeah, and they left Georgia in 1919. Because the father was ill, and just to cure him, and they went through Switzerland, then Germany, and they settled in Germany, in Berlin, and in 23rd they moved to Paris to join the Georgian immigration in Paris.
And I have some photos from there as well, but also I want to stress a little bit for the viewers who are not that familiar with the Georgian culture. Just before they left in 1910, Georgia and Tbilisi specifically was considered kind of heaven for artists. There were many interesting things happening intellectually. There were just artists returning from Paris, like David Kakabadze, Elena Kladiani was active, Lado Gudiashvili, they're all, and as I understand, Pagava's family had connection to this artistic elite, and this influenced her a lot.
That's what I wanted to say. They met, they were in Paris when they arrived in Paris, all this group of painters, of Georgian painters. And we have photographed with Kakabadze, Gudiashvili, Eleni Akhlediani, and Vera and her uncle, who was the brother of her mother, Georgian.
Georgian, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And her uncle was very, very connected to all of these artists, avant-garde artists of that time.
As I can know that he was very connected, and because the father was more jurist and knew all mostly more different people, but he was very interested in all these things. And in Berlin was a very active town. Georgia, yes, was the sort of center of before the revolution. And
before the revolution, yes,
and during the revolution and during the First Republic, they were very active as artists. And what can I say more? Yes, Vera used to say that her father, he traveled in Persia and he traveled in Russia, and he always brought some books, artistic books, to Vera, and the book, the catalog of some photos of Pirosmani. She was a child in this time when the Pirosmani had his first exhibition in Moscow, and it was in 1913, I think.
Yes, and our brothers Danevich, I know that they facilitated this as well, and it was
yes, they discovered
him. Yes, they discovered him, and it's very interesting, this connection of Danevich and Georgians as well. It's very interesting, and this whole time.
Well, the mother was Georgian of the
right.
Danevich.
Yes, of course. Yes, and their legacy. Go ahead.
The father was Polish and was deported to Georgia. And that's why he was living. He was a teacher too, the father of Danevich.
And also this whole idea, the futurism, how they, the Futurist Manifesto, right? The Dadaism that they created. It was such an very dynamic time. And I love this quote that I found about this time in Georgia. Tbilisi, your poets have gathered, and the tower now thunders like the sea, because there were so many interesting things at this point. But unfortunately, as we know, it was all cut short, and Vera, along many other noble families, had to move. Right, so
yes, but since she grew up within this very intellectual family, and very cultural and intellectual and very aware family, and so you can say that she grew up at her young age in this kind of environment, so that maybe predisposed her maybe to start it then her art.
For example, they lived in the same house as the family Rambashidze. Vartan Rambashidze was a famous doctor who created these two sanatoriums for children in Georgia. Right. So they were very close of this family. They knew my family too, but they were very close with the Rambashidze family. You see, that's what I know from this family.
That's so interesting that you still have all these connections kind of with all this from this old time, and how the families you still know these families. It's really such a richness, right, of the fabric of life. So as we mentioned, so in 1919 Pagava's family left Georgia and they traveled to Berlin and Dresden, and you said Switzerland, and then they moved to, how do you pronounce it rightly? Montrouge? Montrouge. Yeah, I keep, sorry, my French is not there. Montrouge, Parisian suburbs, joining.
A very close suburb of Paris.
Sure. And this is an older, I was looking yesterday for a photo of the suburb of Montrouge that has from this 1920s. I couldn't find anything. So this is an older image, image from 19.
Excuse me, that's Paris.
Right, yes.
That's cinema.
Right. So, and then, so let's talk a little bit about first steps of Vera in terms in the field of in terms of her art training. So, was painting something just because you know her legacy so well? Was it something that, you know, some children are attuned to painting from early on and they become artists starting at this very early age? Was that the case with Vera as well, or this was something that came later?
Yes, I think it was something that came very, very early on. When they moved in 1923, Vera was only 16 years old, and right when they arrived, she enrolled different art school. She started with a graphic design school called École Art et Publicité, and then she pursued and enrolled l'école of decorative arts in France, in Paris, and then she also went through different studios such as André Studios.
Yes, so one of this, yes, exactly. I found such an interesting artist as well, and he has such an influence of Cubism as well as in some other paintings. It's a lot of surrealism in his paintings, so it's very interesting school.
And in the Vera's work in the 20s, so which she was only her trainings years, you can tell that they might have this big influence of also the arts of the time, which this Cubism, and mostly when the poster that she made through this design school. I don't know if you have an example, or maybe I can show you afterwards. Can send you afterwards.
I want to say that she went to the André Lotte atelier for the sketches. That's where she studied how to draw the sketches and the models. You see, she said that.
She said that. How about Roger? Pronounce his last name correctly. Boucher.
So yes. In 1932, after all these different studios and art school, she started to study at the Académie Ranson, which was this very free art academy in Montparnasse. And there she studied under Roger Bissier's studio, atelier, where there was this Russian painter, Nicolas Vaquer, who was in Paris at the time, and with whom she became very, very, very good friend. And so at the Académie Ranson, she learned mostly painting. That's how she, I would say, created her singular vision of life through her paintings. And she also met this group of artists, which were all immigrated artists from Portugal, England, Russia, Germany, also Armenia, and
America.
Yes, and Armenia too.
And
all those artists became then afterwards her closest friend. So there's Maria Helena Vieira da Silva, who were like almost her best friend. She would see her every Sunday all her life, and also Jean Lemoyle, Jean Bertol as well. All this group of artists. So it was
a closely knit community of artists.
Exactly.
They were all very close, and I remember the exhibition. They always came all together. All these. I met them. They were old. Every one of them, but never mind. They were always how can I say, very close, and
they would all go to exhibition together and to theater. They would do many things together, and there was this very famous Sundays afternoons where they would all gather at Bertolt's house and different house to just have a cup of tea and talk about art. And so this period at the Académie Ranson was a very essential period for Vera and for her studies, I would say.
Right, and it seems that she created a lot of network at that time of her life.
Exactly.
later on, that continued later on, which is, yeah.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Vano Enukidze. I think it's appropriate to mention him now because I think it was around in 1930s that he moved as I understand, in a house that where Pagavas lived at the time, and that's where they kind of were introduced to each other. So can you tell me a little bit about him and what role did he play in his life, in her life?
Vano Ivane Vano Enukidze was from Kutaisi, but he studied law in Georgia, and in 1930, because of his detestation, his hate, I would say, of the Soviet system, he flew by foot from Georgia to Turkey, where he was wounded, and then he arrived because all of this immigration, they were all going to Paris. Well, there was already a big part of the
community was building there. Yes,
exactly.
Yes, sure.
So in 1930s, he arrived in Montrouge, and he, as you mentioned, he rented a room at the Pagava's house family. So that's how Vera and Vano met, actually. So they were in 1930, and since that time, they started a very, very deep companionship. They would, Vera introduced Vano to all the artists of the Académie Ranson, and that's how he as well enrolled the academy and started to learn fresco there under, I think,
at the end of the 30s.
Yes, under Jean Berthold atelier studio. But Vano at that time, so he was in a way starting to discover art and painting and fresco, but he was also a law student from Georgia. So he continued his studies. He was a very curious
multi-talented
multi-talented, yes. Very multi-talented. And so in France he continued his studies in law and started to focus in international law, where he became a professor, so a doctor. But then in 1955 he quit everything, and he then dedicated his life to painting. And so from 1955 till his death in 1979, he was researching art, in his art, I would say. So he made very, very different, various kind of body of works, mostly abstract paintings, and also abstract oil and ink graphic works on paper, sorry. So Vano was a very, I would say, one of the main person, very important person of her life, but she was very discreet on their
private life.
Yes, their private life. So we know that it was her lifelong time companion, but she would say to people that Vano was her cousin. So as you can understand, she was a very, very discreet
because
person.
After that, when I started to meet her friends, very old women and men, and everyone asked me, were they really cousins?
That's funny.
No, they were not cousins, but I can't say more.
But they lived together, they lived in the same house. They each had their studios in the house. So yeah, we can say that that's why we like to say that it was a lifelong companionship.
That it was clearly very important to both of them, and they relied on each other as two human beings.
Definitely.
I think we can talk now about the legendary and very important figure of Jean Boucher, who was important gallerist and visionary, who supported talents. Initially, she established in 1923 a gallery in the space of Foreign Library, created in the boutique of her friend Pierre Charot, right? And the gallery and later on her gallery represented Picasso, Masson, Gris, Max Ernst, Arp, De Chirico, Lipschitz, Mondrian, among others. And I really love this quote by one of her friends, I believe, an art historian and critic of her time, saying that her instincts led her to each talent likely to move everything in her heart and to animate her spirit. Art was for her like a battlefield where she would give the best of her strengths. So she was very kind of fiery and passionate about her attachments.
She was a very strong woman.
Yes, strong woman, and I have her portrait on the next slide over here. And the image is by Man Ray, and this another image is by Pablo Picasso. But please tell me more about her, because I believe you have much more kind of, you can elucidate this.
Can elucidate what told me her granddaughter. Was the wife of Jean-François Gégère, and the granddaughter, which we have contact very
Elisso, so this is the granddaughter who runs the gallery now, or it is run by someone else?
Who runs the gallery is a great-granddaughter.
So, but it's still in the family, which is
yes, still the family.
Right.
And the granddaughter told me that what Vera told her, that Madame Céressol, who was the director of the Académie Ranson, told Vera that you must meet Jeanne Boucher. And she made an appointment with Jeanne Boucher, and Vera was terrified.
Yes, she looks pretty stern, I can say that.
She called Jeanne Boucher and said, "I will not come."
Right.
And Jeanne Boucher said, "Okay, I'm waiting for you next Thursday."
So this connection in the beginning, it came from her school, through her teacher. Which is always, that's how it works usually. It's interesting that didn't change much, right?
And also that at that time, when I mentioned previously that Maria Helena Vieira da Silva was also, that's at the Académie Ranson that they met. Vieira da Silva was already presented at the Galerie Jeanne Boucher in the 30s. While she was studying. So there was this very connection anyway between the school and the artists already enrolled at the school.
And after, when she went there, Vera, she said she carried 2 or 3 paintings, and Jeanne Boucher told her, I trust you. I will make your exhibition with Dora Maar, because Dora Maar, with Dora Maar will come a lot of people, like all these painters and very well-known people, and that's what she did.
Yes, and I just said, yes, please go ahead.
No, she made the exhibition in 44.
Yes.
And
yes, I have this from this exhibition, the invitation to the exhibition, which was interesting to find, from 1944 to this. But also I wanted to ask you a little bit, so did Jeanne Boucher support women artists? Was she, or was it she just supported the artists that she liked? That was her.
I think she had to like the artist.
And then based on this,
she wanted to help, to support women. There were not
that many.
There were not that many. Yes, and I think Dora Maar was also one of the, one of the.
Exactly.
Yes.
No, exactly. Dora Maar. She supported Dora Maar. She supported, until nowadays, Vieira da Silva, and she discovered, I would say, Vera Pagava. So there's
she gave the chance to Vera Pagava.
Yes. So yes, I would say that she was a very avant-gardist and a very determined art dealer. In the 40s to showcase a duo show of women artists. I think it was a very bold thing to do.
It was bold, and also just pairing of Dora Maar and Vera, who was pretty much at that point, she was not known in Paris, as I understand, right? So
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
already a daring decision. And as I understand, I remember we talked about this before. It brought, and Elissa just mentioned, it brought crowds, right? Because people came to see both of them. I mean, Dora and
tragical.
Yes, there was, for example, Picasso and Braque, also Dominguez. They all signed the gallery book, and yes, so the exhibition was kind of a success. There was this big support of this very established and well-known artists.
But I must add that was during the war.
Yes, of course. That's another thing. And I was really looking for a photograph in of Vera when she was involved in nursing, but I couldn't find anything. So tell me a little bit about this. So she got the nursing degree during the war.
Yes, it was when the war started. She said, "You want to be a nurse to help people." That's all. Mm-hmm. And she started to study, and she passed the exams, and was graduated as a nurse. But
as a nurse, and she worked
as a nurse.
She
didn't work.
She didn't work actually as a nurse.
She asked to work, but they said they had. Well, in France, the war stopped.
Right.
In 1940, so right. She didn't have the opportunity to
actually use the license.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Next.
Yes, next. So in terms of, yes, I wanted to next ask you about the ongoing relationship between the gallery and the Jean Boucher, now Jaeger Gallery, with Vera's legacy now. And because it's very interesting to see how this relationship that started in 1940 still continues, and how they exhibit her. When I went to their website, you see that they exhibit Vera every 5 to 7 years, including, I saw this beautiful exhibition, I hope that people can see this from here, Celestial Bodies, right, in 2016, 2017, and also they showcased her in the group exhibition in 2018. So can you tell me a little bit more about this ongoing relationship with this gallery, and now your association probably?
So yes, so we said that in 1944 her first exhibition. Then afterwards, in 1946, actually Jean Boucher passed away. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, so they had a very short time, I would say, working together. But right. Still, Vera was still presented at the gallery until 1960. Afterwards, mm-hmm. she wasn't with the gallery, but it's only recently that we started again to continue to collaborate with this very important for Vera's work and career, but also a very important historical gallery. And so it was in 2016 and 2017, we organized with the gallery, but also with 2 other galleries in Paris. The show was in 3 different galleries, at the Galerie Jean Boucher, Galerie Le Minotaure, and also Galerie Alain Le Gaillard. And so, beautifully curated by Mathieu Poirier.
And a very good text. I read his text. Yes, it was very interesting text.
Very interesting. Yes, I think Mathieu's work was very interesting for Vera's. And so it was, I would say, a first new collaboration, I would say, with the gallery. And since then, because they also own a nice collection of Paravas, she's included in several group shows since then. Mm-hmm. And we might next year will be also she will be also presented next year as among a group show dedicated to women artists of the gallery.
That's great. Let me just. So now let's talk a little bit more in terms of just actually see more of her work, because I don't think that many people have seen Vera's work in general, unfortunately, outside of Georgia, outside of art circles. So this is some of her more traditional work in 1940s and 1950s. And feel free to comment in any way that you feel is important.
So in the 1940s, I would say that she created a body of work with different kind of a series of painting. There was many portraits, such as Les Maignan, as you see right now, with this kind of portraits. But she also, because she was a very spiritual person, she created a large body of work dedicated to biblical themes. From the Testament. There was a lot of pietas, or she made this very incredible painting called The Instrument of Passion, the Passion of Christ, the instrument where you can see
the cross and all
just a cross and all the instruments,
right,
without any presence of a human figure. And so this was in the 40s, and also which is something that is very typical of Vera's, very singular of her work, is the series of the still lifes. In which we can maybe you can tell us, Nina, we can see the influence of Pirosmani, I would say.
I mean, there is some. Actually, I included one of this here, but I wanted to ask you one thing that caught my interest just now. So, in terms of her spirituality, did she consider herself I don't know, the traditional Orthodox Christian coming from Georgia, or she kind of, yes, she did?
Yes,
that's
she
something that stayed with her.
Yes,
she used to sing in the church, in the choir.
In the church, really? in the Georgian church in Paris.
The Georgian church.
And she also donated a very beautiful painting to the church. She was very involved in all those things. And she also, through her life, she would sometimes go in a convent just to think and meditate.
That's very interesting. Yes, it's such an important part of her personality then, because you can see this subdued spirituality in this works, in some of them. It's great to hear that it actually comes from the real experience of this. Yeah,
exactly. And you can tell really because of all of those series from the 1940s, actually, with these biblical themes. And she also participated to many fairs, no, not fairs, salons, group shows, group exhibitions dedicated to spiritual art and sacred art. Every year since I think the beginning of the 1950s. And as you know, I'm sure, she also in 1958 she received this big commission by the Vatican, the Holy See, to create large mural painting representing the Christ welcoming the souls to heaven.
And so, yes, this was part of one of the exhibitions in one of the important exhibitions for her, as I understand.
Yes, it was part of the Universal International
exhibition. In Brussels, right? In 1958. Yes, I saw that.
And plus, excuse me, she painting the convent, the Catholic convent in France, but very the monastery.
She painted, monastery.
The monasteries.
Murals, right.
Yes. Not murals.
Not the murals, but the
themes. Elisso meant that she represented a lot of convent in her themes of painting. She would paint the Abbey of Fontevraud.
Yes, that's I saw in some of the paintings you can see this. But as she moved to abstraction, it's kind of, now it's interesting for me to think about her abstractions in this spiritual way, because somehow I never came across that information, that it was very important part to her personally. And it makes a lot of sense to me, as a curator, to look at this through this as a lens. When you look at some of her works, how she connects, how she tries to express more spiritual ideas with these abstractions. It's interesting.
Yes. That's true, that her paintings are very meditative,
exactly.
and very peaceful, strong, but peaceful. And I would say that she always, throughout her life, she would always say that she wanted to represent her inner visions.
And then, so these two paintings are from 1956, right? No, one is from 1950 and one from 1956. So here she starts already to kind of to move from what she did before, from here to more kind of geometric abstraction, so to more kind of loose forms, right? So the formations that are there, but at the same time, they exist by themselves without trying to represent specific people. So in one way, and then in geometry. Yes.
Exactly. Bodies became more silhouettes than a representation of a specific person. As you can see in the previous picture, you can see the eyes, and even if it's a more naive kind of way of painting, it's still a representation of humans. Here, it's more, silhouettes, such as you can see in the Bataille des Thermopyles. It's almost like a choreographical ballet.
Yes, it has this very dynamic kind of dancing, but at the same time, she brings this idea from Greek history, right? The Battle of Thermopyles, where they have all this, so she still uses this idea that you probably read about, but at the same time, she reinterprets it in a very unique kind of individual way.
Yes, in the 50s, so because you're talking about this battle, so in the 50s, that's when she started to this series of what we called the battle series, which are a different representation of mythological battle or ancient, mythological battle, from Greek history, and those kind of landscapes, more imaginary landscapes, maybe quiet landscapes, and also what would become a very important series is the city series. As you can see, La Ville Morte, which is
the dead city, right? This is poignant.
And so all of those cities are either imaginary cities, like the Dead City, for example, or sometimes also actual places. She painted, for example, Montrouge, where she lived, the Rue de Rivoli, which is a very famous city in Paris. Streets in Paris. And so at that time, her city series are still figurative. It's then that she would switch towards not already abstraction, but something close.
Some elements to it, yes, because it took her about, I believe, at least from looking at the paintings that I'm able to see online, it took her roughly about 10 years to move from very specific figurative representation to more abstract, at least 10 years, if not more.
Exactly.
And so this is more in between, and this is somewhere where I see some of this influence from Pirosmani, exactly, and he's like this whole kind of her play with this dimensions, right? How she but at the same time, I love how laconic it is, how minimal and restricted it is in terms of color and in terms of shape. But at the same time, now that I look at the fishes, and you think how fish is a very important Christian symbol, right? In Christianity, it stands for Christ, like the fish is the symbol. So I guess in a way she was making a larger statement, more kind of spiritual statement here as well, together with just looking at the shapes and the forms.
Exactly. As you said, there's a lot of biblical iconography, sacred iconography throughout her works, and not only biblical themes. As you say, the still life painting are very much there's a lot of iconographical element that we can connect to the biblical themes.
Yes, and biblical thematic.
In Christian, yes.
Ça représente le Christ, les trois poissons.
Sorry. No, that's fine. So this is more work from 1960s and onwards. So this is where more of kind of abstract motives and abstract kind of foundation comes into view, right? So and I mean, also in terms of her color, we know that she restricted her palette, but also I think it was very conscious decision that she was coming towards, because but from the very beginning, it doesn't seem to me that she was that color was of a great importance to her. I mean, it was of importance, but you know, creating this vibrant kind of scenes were not something that was interesting to her from the early on. She always restricted her palette with something with essential colors, like a few colors for foundation, and then she worked with them. And I think this continued through the years, and we can see this also in these paintings from later years here. But can you tell me a little bit about this specific one, because it's so interesting and so different. Like you can see that in 1969 she was kind of grappling with this, and then she moved. This is from 1962, but this is also so different from what she was doing before. Can you tell me a little bit about this specific painting?
Well, maybe this painting called Venice, so it's a representation of a city. So I was saying that in the end of the 1950s, she started this series of city series.
Yeah, so this is one of those, right?
Yeah, which was figurative, and then from 1960, she completely switched to and started to how do you say, decompose the figure and create those city series that, as you see, with these little color squares, which are a kind of a fragmentation of space and light. Vera was very, very interesting in how to render, how to reproduce or to seek the inner light in a way.
Right. So this was some one of those searches and investigations for her.
Yes, and in most of Vera's painting, which is something that is interesting because her life research was searching towards abstraction, something which was more minimalist. It's searching for the a pure, something more minimalistic, and so even from older painting, if you remove the figure from all her painting, you can already see an abstract painting on the back.
Right, so it's kind of, it's already.
If you take off the figures, you have the structure of the abstraction.
Yes.
Yes, and this is more from 1976, 1978. So this is where she has the structure. And this seems to be, was this a series of works that she loosely connected that has the same kind of approach in terms of the composition, or they just happen to be similar in the way that they're created in terms of the
I would say that I mean, at the end of the 1970s, she created a few. I cannot say it's a series, but she created several paintings of mountain landscapes with more bold, even subtle, but more bold lines, which were more evanescent in the 1960s. So that's how her, maybe that's how her research towards abstraction started to be clearer. She would be more, be more bold in her lines, I would say.
Maybe she was also reminded a little bit about Georgian mountains when she was painting this.
Yeah.
And
that Georgia was still in her mind all the time.
Yes, I wanted to ask you this. Yes, what was she ever? Did she ever express, you know, her wish to go back to Georgia at some point? I mean, not the Soviet Georgia, but was it something that she thought throughout her life, or was that the country that she left in the past?
It was she was nostalgic of the country, but she was a child when,
of course, yes,
when she left Georgia. But she always kept the language. She was talking to us in Georgian always.
So in Georgia,
yeah, she speaks very fluently French, but she has an accent, and she. Maybe she thought of going back, as after the war, the Second World War, some of this Russian and Georgian, Armenian went back to Georgia, but she thought, but she didn't go, and but she lived as an immigrant.
Yes.
Anyway, until the end of her life. as most of her generation did, in fact.
So yes, she grew up with within this Georgian community in Paris, which were all thinking that a possible return was possible, you know.
Who knew that it would last for 70 years, right?
Yes, yes.
But they thought until 25, they thought that the Soviet Union
will collapse.
And they will all go back home. But it didn't collapse. So they
it didn't. It became it became bloodier and stronger, definitely, as we know.
But it was very difficult for them.
But and so just to talk a little bit about this Georgian. So even in when she was living in France, she had a lot of artist friend was I said you know, artists from the Académie Ranson, but also artists and friends that she made all the way afterwards. But she had a very big connection with the Georgian community, and she had most of her friends were also Georgian from this Georgian community. She was singing at the church, the Georgian church in.
So it was part of her life.
Yes, it was part of her life, and in a way, we can tell that in her work there's this kind of a melancholia, this kind of nostalgia that you cannot take apart from being an immigrated. You know,
because it's always something missing, something out that's missing, part of you.
And the colors.
Yes.
You look the colors are not are really of the Middle East.
Right.
Looks like. Not sure, but as a gallerist told me, she was, comment on dit culottée en...
bold. She was very ambitious.
She was very ambitious with the colors.
She was very daring. Yes, she was daring.
Some colors were what colors the other painters didn't dare.
Right. And also, for example, when I look at this, it's from 1982, and this is such a striking and such a very, the structure is so simple, and it's but it tells you everything you need to see. It's there. It's with the color and the structure, and you can take it in many metaphoric way. You can imagine it to be anything, and it could be very spiritual. It could be very concrete. So it's she was that's really yes. You can take it many ways, and that's what I think is best about art, right? That we can meet it at very different places where we are.
And this artwork is from so the last part of her life, where I would say she was then painting abstract painting. Right. This is titled Three Colors. This, you know, until the 1970s, maybe early 1970, she was still painting non-figurative painting, you know, which has precise location or precise titles, such as this convent, this, you know, or this landscape. And then in 1980, she completely switched towards this kind of very minimalistic, very endearing paintings.
Yes, and the titles also reflect this, I believe. They've also become more abstract and more open-ended. And I would like to ask you, in terms of besides creating her works besides creating painting, also Pagova worked with watercolor, stained glass design, batik design, right? Fabrics and etching. So can you tell me a little bit more about other mediums that she engaged with, including this beautiful, outstanding stained glass windows? And I know that she received several commissions at some points, right, to work on this. So please tell me more about it.
Maybe I'll just start with I'll start. So Vera's technique were mostly oil painting, watercolor, engraving, and drawings. This was what she would make in her studio, besides of the drawing, which were only created outside her studio when she was away traveling, and she was created those suggestive landscapes. But in the 1930s, because she needed to earn her life and support her family, because it was a very hard time at the time, she started to created those patterns for fabrics, and she also did some batik technique. But this was made for furniture company in Lyon, in east part of France. And this was mostly, she started this because she needed to earn money, to earn her life. And that's how she started to create those very interesting vegetal and floral and very beautiful textile that she also exhibited in 1938 and 1939 as part of the group Témoignage, which was a very important group, a gathering of artists around a big avant-garde figure called Marcel Michaud. And so this was for the fabrics. Then at the end of her life, so in the 80s, she had this large commission by this church in Dijon, which is in Burgundy in France, to create, to draw and to create all the stained glasses, as well as the liturgical furniture of the church. They all are still in the church in Dijon. You can go and visit if you're in France.
Yes, I will. At some point, I will definitely. I would love that.
There was the church burned. All the stained glass was destroyed. So they asked Vera to make some new.
Make some new ones, yes. And so, in a way, it's kind of course, close to her own personal. Spiritual journey, I would say, and also in the way and maybe her artistic approach. It's the work on light and shadow, and with stained glasses. What can I say?
That was definitely something that I'm sure she really she relished working with this, and yes, because it has all the parts that she was really interested in as an artist. So from 1950s, and I was really trying to find some visual information on this. Maybe you can send it to me later and I can share it with our viewers. Also, so in 1950s, Pagova was invited to participate in numerous important exhibitions, including the Universal Exhibition in Brussels that you mentioned in 1958, and then Gallery Meltzer in New York in 1959. And then, of course, she represented France at Venice Biennale in 1966, where, as I know, she had a separate pavilion with her watercolors. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about this and how her art was received by her contemporaries. That's interesting to hear also.
Well, she was very followed and supported by the critics. At the time, she was also very supported by another very important person in Vera's career called Jacques Lassagne, who at the time was an art critic and art curator, and he was the curator of the Venice, the French pavilion at the Venice.
So he was the curator of the pavilion.
Yes.
And was this the person who studied at the same school, or that was a different critic? Because I think I saw his name there.
He didn't study there, but he was very close to all the artists.
Close to the artists, yes.
So that's how they met. That's when they met. It's at the Académie Ranson. And since then, he was following her work. And Jacques Lassagne became, in the 1970s, I think maybe I'm not misleading, he became the chief curator of the Museum of Modern Art of Paris. Of Paris.
So he had this ongoing connection with Vera and support.
Yes. I mean, Vera had different very important supporters for her life. There was Jacques Lassagne, of course, Jeanne Boucher after. Also Pierre Granville, who was a philanthropist, art collector, and who was the director of the Museum of Dijon, and who became afterwards, and who.
But he was a art collector, and he made a lot of exhibitions. He lived in a flat under the roof of in Paris, and he made different exhibition of his artists and of Vera, of course.
And he left a beautiful collection of
a
huge collection of modern art at the Museum of Fine Arts in Dijon, in Burgundy. And so there's him, and there's also afterwards Serge Lemoine, who that Vera knew and met in the 1980s, who will become afterwards. He was a very important art historian, and who will then became director of the museum in Dijon, also in Grenoble, and also at the Museum of Orsay in Paris.
Director
of Orsay Museum. And he was a very, very important supporter of Vera. It's thanks to him that Vera did this large commission, public commission, and at the end of her life, she made a huge triptych painting for a telecom building in Dijon. And so that's thanks to Serge Lemoine. And so throughout her life, she was very supported, but mostly, I would say, mostly by the critics. She was bought, her artwork were bought in several public collections, such as Pompidou. When she was alive, Pompidou Center, they bought several.
They said, okay, so they purchased this because that was one of my questions. So they did the acquisition before, and then later on, a few years.
And then we made a donation. But maybe I'll talk to you, or maybe Elisso will tell you about this later on. But so yes, Vera was part of the public collection when she was alive. So at the Museum of Modern Art of Paris, the Pompidou Center, for example, also in Lausanne, the Fine Art Museum of Lausanne in Switzerland. She is also in Grenoble, in Dijon, and I'm forgetting maybe something in the what we call the FNAC. It's the Le FRAC and the FNAC, both. It's the National Contemporary Art Fund. And also the Regional Contemporary Art Fund, both of them, acquired several paintings and engravings of Paris when she was alive.
There are 2 paintings in the ONU in New York.
Okay.
I think they're still there.
No, Elisso, where exactly in New York?
Comment dire, l'ONU, United Nations.
United Nations collection. Yes, some of it is also. That's good to know.
Maybe the French part.
Yes, maybe in the French department. I think now it will be very appropriate to talk about your mother and what role did Tamar Tarassachvili, right? And Daryl Gallery.
The real name. the short name.
And the Daryl Gallery. So what role did your mother play? When did she meet Vera? As I understand, the families knew each other from the very beginning, and then what was the relationship, how it grew, and how the Daryl Gallery came to support Vera Pagava?
My mother knew Vera from her childhood, but when they came to France, first my mother left her 2 daughters, my mother and her sister, to the Pagava for a few months. I'm telling you that she was comment dire, elle leur faisait confiance. Je mélange les langues.
It's okay, let's start again. So Elisso, so my grandmother, they knew Vera since they were a child. Since she was a child, she was younger than Vera, 15 years younger. Right. Because the family were very trusting each other.
Yes, they were trusting each other. So that's how
it started.
That's what it started. And during the war and all this period, my mother was close with Vera. She loved her painting. And after my mother worked in the very famous gallery, after my father died in the 61, she started to work in the famous gallery of Louis Carré in Paris, who exhibited all these big painters as Nicolas de Staël, Marcel Duchamp, and all these kind. And
she was involved in those.
She was very involved in this work. She was making the, comment on dit, les accrochages, the hanging of the exhibition, because Louis Carré trusted her, and she was very interested. She was always interested in art, and this gallery closed, and she started to run her own gallery. And she opened at last in 1972 the Gallery d'Arial with Vera Pagava, who was without any gallery. And they started there with the first exhibition of Vera in 1972.
Vera became her leading artist.
And they had some friends of Vera, artists, and
such as Serge Charchoun, for example. So this art gallery was a very contemporary art gallery. She wanted also to represent more Georgian artists as well. It was something that Vera was very trying to suggest, very
facilitate also, yeah, because she clearly supported Georgians and was still in touch with them.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
Yes, yeah. But not only Georgian paintings.
Not only.
She made a very nice exhibition of the avant-garde, the Russian avant-garde with Zdanevich, and exhibited Kirill Zdanevich with a very big success. And she sold every painting she had.
And that was a successful exhibition.
Yes.
And voilà. And Vera, it was every 2 years she made exhibition of Vera.
Yeah, approximately. And then the gallery in the 1970s, after it's open, it welcomed this group of women artists. This was initiated by Charlotte Calmis, who was the French artist, very, I would say, interesting in the question of women, feminism and women art.
The women's movement
yes,
this time.
And so the gallery welcomed for a few events, this group, La Spirale, that was created by this Charlotte Calmis. And so even though Pagava was not really part of this group, she was very close to Charlotte Calmis and all of those women artists of the time. And that's how in 1978, the very famous feminist video artist and filmmaker Carole Rossopoulos, alongside with Marie Jobonnet, the art historian, they created this documentary series on 3 women artists, Charlotte Calmis, Aline Gagnère, and Vera Pagava.
Oh, that's so. Is it possible to see it somewhere? It's interesting.
Unfortunately, there's only what is left is only Rush, But I can send you what I have. You can ask also the Simone de Beauvoir Document Center, where they keep all of these archives from of Rossopoulos, but mostly this big collection of women documentarists and women filmmakers and video artists.
That's but it's so interesting that it was documented at that time. It will be just great to see it and kind of incorporate in this the big big life that Vera led. And so she passed away, as I know, in 1988, and Ile-de-France. So and then she never had children, right? So can you tell me a little bit about like her later years? She was a successful artist already. She was well known in France, I'm sure. She probably was well known in Europe at some point. At that point, so
she didn't have the recognition. She wasn't that well known at the time, but she acquired as
Serge Lemoine, who was very close. He says she was very well known in the artistic
circles, yes, which it does make which doesn't mean that everybody, but the artistic circles.
No,
yes.
but she was very respected because some of painters told me that when I make my inquiries,
sure,
they were very how can I say
frightened
by her judgment.
She was a strict Georgian woman.
And she was saying, you're talking too much in this painting.
Right.
too many
so she
words.
was very honest, and it makes that she was very direct. It seems like her personality was very up to the point.
But the last years were difficult because she was ill, and in the same time she made this stained glass. It was very difficult for her. She had to go to Burgundy, and she was living by herself, and she didn't want anybody to stay with her. So we had to run to see her,
to help.
To help.
Yes, and she had this very I would say very mean neighbors who lived the house next door to hers, who how do you say who
boated her house.
Yes.
Who bought her house, and he wanted to kick her out of the house, so he
made her life impossible. He made her life impossible by knocking on her door at night, knocking on her walls at night. So it was a very stressful time for this woman who was who was starting to get old and very ill. So it was she had a lot of support of the artistic community at that time because of this situation, which was impossible for her to live, and she passed away soon afterwards.
And so Elisso and Anna, so can you tell me a little bit, so in terms of the presentations of Vera Pagava now worldwide, and it's very exciting to see her presented now. And I mean, I just pulled a few examples.
And that was the freeze.
The freeze from last year, and it was very exciting for me to see her work, in New York Times. Not that I know that she was featured in other press worldwide, but it's just, when you see Georgian artists here, it's a very interesting moment. So, and this is also picture from the photo from Kornfeld Gallery, Berlin presentation for Frieze last year. Yes. And I know there are two ongoing exhibitions just now, right? So one is, can you tell me a little bit about these two exhibitions? Because I have the Center Pompidou one and this Gallery Jérôme Pogge. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Pagava has a big actual news actuality right now. Actually, there's many shows ongoing and future shows to come. So since beginning of May, there's this duo show at the Galerie Jérôme Pogge in the Marais in Paris, which is exactly in front of the Centre Pompidou. And it was, so Vera is presented alongside with this amazing Norwegian woman artist who was Anna Eva Bergman, who was a contemporary to Pagava's. And so the gallerist Jérôme Pogge, when he discovered Pagava, he already soon afterwards he was thinking of showcasing her with Anna Eva Bergman, which is an artist that he's supporting since many years. And it's interesting to see how even if they have a very different technique and different atmosphere and different colors, how their work are in a way very close in their research of minimalism, of landscapes, and so it's a very interesting and beautiful dialogue between those two artists who were contemporary and who might have met at André Lot's studios in 1929.
They might have met.
Right. We don't know.
And when I looked at this exhibition and the Bergman's work, I felt like there is also the spirituality. So maybe there is this kind of connection between these two women artists who used maybe similar method, but arrived at very different results. So it's
Exactly.
it's a very beautiful juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm.
At least
No,
digitally, I can say that.
No, it works very well. We're very happy of this show. And in front of this gallery, there's the Centre Pompidou, which is dedicating now a large group show to women artists and their contribution to abstraction.
Right.
And so Vera is featured in this exhibition with 3 large paintings, which belong to the City series from the 1960s.
So the series that you mentioned before.
So yes, the fragmented cities. And so in this exhibition, which is a very, very beautifully curated by Christine Mastel, one of the chief curator of modern art in Centre Pompidou, it's a very, very beautiful show. And so what is exhibited, it's one painting that Elisso donated in 2016, one painting from the association, and also another city from the National Contemporary Art Fund. And then this show is until August 23rd, and then we'll travel to Bilbao at the Guggenheim.
Right, I saw that it's traveling to Spain. That's very exciting. Yes, it's
very exciting.
Anything else that's coming up in the near future for Vera? Anything in the States, or this is very hard for the.
For now, not in the States, but maybe soon.
Maybe soon.
Soon. No, there's going to be an opening show, a group show in Lausanne in Switzerland at the Museum of Fine Arts. And this is something very thrilling for us because it will be the first time we will see both of the artworks, abstract painting that they acquired from Vera in the 1960s and 70s. So it's opening June 18, I think, and it's a gathering of work of contemporary artists and modern artists. And then Vera will be also showcased at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, part of a large show dedicated to muse and of Montparnasse from end of the 19th century till the 1930s. And we landed two paintings from the 1930s, one which is more surrealistic form, and another one is more a carnivalesque woman with a mask. And so this will be for this summer, and afterwards we will be showcased at Art Paris this fall with the Gallery Chauvi. And then there's going to be this the Women and Abstraction at Bilbao at the Guggenheim Museum. And then 2022, let's stay tuned for the next.
Well, I think I think you're doing such an excellent work with her legacy, and I know how hard it is to organize exhibitions and to push for exhibitions. And it's, I'm very grateful as a Georgian that you're doing this for this amazing Georgian artists. And this is.
Well, next step will be to organize a new large show in Georgia, which is something
it should be done. It should be done.
It's on the way.
Yes, maybe.
We have done one.
Excuse me?
We have done one
yes, I saw that but all these exhibitions, I feel like these big retrospectives, they need to be repeated every 10 years for every new generation, because whoever was a child back then, now they will grow up and they will look at it very different eyes. And also I feel there is a very different kind of feminist consciousness in Georgia. I don't know if you noticed this, but this younger women artists that try to engage, and they need the figures like Vera Pagava, like other artists that I'm covering in this episode, because that's what I thought it was important to showcase this artist, because the larger public is not that really familiar. I mean, they know Vaflediani, they might have heard of Pagava, they might have heard of Yankoshvili, but it's not really, there is not enough information. And I'm very glad. Thank you so much for taking your time, and I really appreciate you talking in detail about this. And thank you for your work.
And thank you very much, Nina, for your work and your invitation.
You're working a lot.
Well, I appreciate that. And I hope that we'll meet in Paris or in Georgia at some point in the near future.
I hope so. Or maybe New York.
Or maybe New York, yes, always welcome. Thank you so much, ladies, appreciate it.
You're living in New York?
Yes, I live here.